Hey everybody, it's Andy Kushner, host of The Wedding Biz. Oh, I love saying that every week. I have had so many exciting new interviews recently. Some are part two with some of the icons who have already been on the show. Some are brand new. I also have some trips coming up to New York City, San Francisco. Just so much exciting stuff going on. Very excited to bring it to you. If you are a new listener, welcome to the show. Be sure to check our archive, whether you're a new listener or not, because there is so much there in the back catalog, which you could find on your cell phone podcast app or on the website, theweddingbiz.com. Just gobs and gobs of incredible information, education, inspiration with these wonderful guests. So check the back archive. So if you missed last week's episode, it was Amy Moeller, editor-in-chief of the regional successful wedding publication, Washingtonian Weddings. Really great interview. And this week, it is Brett Culp. Brett is an acclaimed filmmaker and social entrepreneur. He started in the luxury end of weddings and had quite a pivot after the recession of 2008. I don't want to reveal too much right now. I just want to say this, though. The conversation was one of the most inspiring ones I have ever had in or out of the industry. I urge you to check this whole thing out. I personally am going to listen to it multiple times. I've already heard it twice, and I end it feeling so uplifted, so inspired, so empowered. So give this one your full attention. And again, I suggest listening more than once. And don't forget to listen to the follow-on episode, The Next Level. And by the way, I might be changing that and having it be released a little later in the week. I might be experimenting with that. Not sure yet. But anyway, The Next Level, as all of you know, I have a guest co-host, and we talk about the highlights of the interview and deliver it in a way that is going to help you raise your business to the next level. And for this one, I've got a very interesting co-host for The Next Level for Brett's show, who I'm going to release an interview of him in the next few months, named Zach Oxman. Zach is a true artist, a creative himself who has quite a story, which you'll eventually hear. So check out The Next Level as well. It's really good. So now, enjoy my conversation with Brett Culp. Well, hey, Brett, man, it is so fun to have you on the show. It's been years since we met and worked on some very exciting projects together. You were fully, at the time that I met you, a videographer breaking into the Lux market, weddings and events. And when I went through your website just a couple months ago, I mean, Brett, man, I was blown away. It's like you seem to have made just an incredible pivot, and what you're doing is so inspiring.
Well, you know, what we did together, Andy, was we went on so many adventures at these events, at live events together. And so much of that was really the groundwork, the experience that I had in the wedding industry of learning how to tell stories, of learning how to be in environments that I couldn't control, where things would unexpectedly happen all the time that nobody knew were going to happen, and yet they did, and you have to respond to it. And then, you know, learning how to essentially, as a filmmaker, what I would call script in the editing room, which was, you know, most filmmakers have a script and then they shoot the script and they edit to the script. I didn't have any of that. I was starting from scratch every time and figuring it out. And so the bottom line is there were just so many skills that I was learning along the way that now, as a documentary filmmaker, you know, with bigger projects that are now on Netflix and Hulu and Amazon Prime and doing all the keynote speaking I'm doing, it's funny, I'm back into the world of live events, but in a very different way.
Well, I'd like to go back to that early part of your career, because from what I hear you saying is that really is the foundation that everything you have now is built upon, is the experience that you got while you were in the wedding and the event industry. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, so when I first met you, Brett, like you were so passionate about uncovering and telling stories, which again, I know is what you're doing today. And back then it was about couples, you know, through weddings, and about helping companies and individuals brand themselves. I remember we talked about that too with your industry work. So just going back for a minute, like when you were a child and growing up, because we know that has so much influence on who we are today, were you passionate about film and child growing up, or rather film and video as a child growing up?
I was. I mean, I loved films. I imagined myself in films. When my dad first brought a video camera into our house, he thought he was bringing it in to capture memories of our childhood, but that's not what I saw at all. I immediately took that camera, started taking, you know, my action figures and making little stop motion movies with them where I did all the voices. Anytime my friends would get together, they wanted to play football in the backyard. To me, they were just characters in one of my movies, but that was the way I was wired. But at some point in my preteen years, somebody said to me, well, I know you love doing this, but you can't really do this for a living because the only way to do it is to move to Hollywood and sell your soul to the devil. You know what I mean? You have to enter an industry that will destroy your integrity, destroy, that's full of just evil things and evil people. And, I didn't understand, nor did those well-meaning individuals, that there are so many different ways to accomplish the dreams you have and use the skills you have. There are so many different, you can create your own niches. And I mean, the internet now provides us unlimited opportunity for not just plugging into the old systems that have already existed, but frankly, creating your own systems, your own career, your own world in a brand new way.
Well, so how did you transition into doing this as a career? I mean, you went to college?
Yeah. So, I mean, I went to college. And while I was in college, I was in a college town that I didn't grow up in for the second 2 years of my college. It was Bowling Green, Kentucky. I went to Western Kentucky University because they had a wonderful journalism program there. But I was really more studying photojournalism and writing. It wasn't video or motion picture at all. And I got to the college, I moved in the week of, and all of the jobs were taken. It was a small college town. There were no normal jobs available. The only job I could find was working at 3 a.m. at Target. Terrible job, right? And so I immediately said, how am I going to get out of this job? And I said, I can film things for people. So I put those flyers all over campus, the ones that have the rip-off phone number at the bottom of them, little tabs. You remember those things? And so I put up that I did every kind of video service. And at the very bottom, I included weddings. I had never filmed a wedding. I knew nothing about weddings, but I was in a small college town in Kentucky, and what they had were weddings. And so somebody called me. I did my first wedding for $150. It was absolutely horrific. The video footage is terrible. I called my dad that night, and I said, this was horrible. I'm never doing this again. 2 weeks later, I delivered the video. One of the bride's friends saw it and said, hey, would you do mine?
Oh, come on. That's funny. The one that you thought was so horrible.
Exactly. So I said, okay, but I'm raising the price to $250. She said, yes, we did it. And for me, kind of the rest is history. I realized that there was this niche that I had no idea existed, where I could use this passion that I had for my camera and filming things and editing things. And there was this whole wedding industry. And so for me, that launched in. And by the time I graduated from college, my fee was up to $600. I had this little business that was growing. I moved back to Tampa, Florida, which is where I grew up, which was a bigger market. And really, I didn't stop. I didn't miss a beat. I went right into building my wedding business and being an entrepreneur in the wedding industry right out of college.
Well, and eventually, because I was there, with some of the people you met, you got to the point where I believe you were even working with David Tutera. You were breaking into the Lux market, and you did that for quite a while, didn't you? And you did it very successfully.
I did, and I felt very fortunate and very blessed with the opportunities I had in that. I remember saying in the first couple of years of my business, I kind of created this weird sort of goal that was like a nebulous goal. And the goal was, if Oprah ever had a wedding videographer on her show, I would want it to be me. And it was a weird sort of goal, a goal that I actually never achieved. Oprah's show ended and I was never on it. But it was a good, weird sort of goal because I reversed engineered it. So I said, okay, if Oprah was going to have somebody on their show, who would it be? Well, it was probably the person doing the most incredible work. Okay, well, how can I improve my work? It was probably going to be the person working with celebrities. Okay, well, how can I start working with celebrities? It was probably people that were filming weddings all over the world. Well, how can I start filming weddings all over the world? And it was that weird goal that I never achieved that forced me to reverse engineer and set the smaller goals for myself that over the course of a decade, really in my 20s, led to that opportunity, as you said, to work with Colin Cowie and with David Tutera and with Sasha Souza and with many of these big wedding icons all over the world that led to some amazing stuff that you and I did together.
Yeah, I remember we did some great stuff together. But what would you identify as some of the key elements that you're talking about that you had to develop with that goal that you had in order to get you into that level?
Yeah, so I break it down, all of this down when I look at any business I've done, but the wedding business is a great example of it. It all breaks down to three things for me. And they're actually pretty simple conceptually, but they're hard to do. And the first thing is, which is just do great work. Get really, really good at your craft, like amazing at it, like so good at it that you could do it automatically, but so good at it also that you can improv in the moment because you're so confident. So my first thing was do great work. And my second was show it to lots of people. And what that meant at the time, because we didn't have the internet when I was first building my business, was making calls into these these companies, making connections, meeting people. There were times when I would get on a plane to fly to meet an event planner in New York City. I would sit in their lobby and some intern would walk out and say, sorry, they're busy. They can't meet with you today. We'll have to reschedule.
Wait a minute, Brett. You're saying you didn't necessarily have an appointment. You'd get on a plane, fly up there.
Oh, I had an appointment.
Oh, but they would come out and say that to you? Oh, my God.
Yeah. They would still come out and say, well, I had the appointment. I was scheduled to meet with them at 1 for 15 minutes. Right. I had everything ready, all that stuff. And they would say, sorry. Yeah, maybe they never intended to meet with me, but who knows? I would get on the plane. I would come home. I would get up the next morning. I would call that same place back and I would say, okay, you canceled on me yesterday. When are we going to do this?
Wow. And you would not necessarily mention you were out of town.
Oh, no. Well, sometimes I did. And sometimes they knew it and they'd cancel on me anyway.
Incredible. And yet you had that more than persistence. You had such a positive attitude about it that you could get home and go again for it.
Well, that was the thing. I would go again. And the next time they almost kind of felt too guilty to cancel on me because they knew, and they're like, okay, I'm going to give this kid 15 minutes. I mean, I was a 26, 27-year-old, at that time. And so I had no big credibility. And there were times when I would walk into the office and I know that there were gigs that I got and meetings that I got because I showed it to lots of people and I was determined about that. But then it was the third thing that I think has made a big difference. And the third thing is be real nice, which is once I got that meeting, I was a pleasure to be with. They liked being with me. And it's amazing to me how often in nearly any business, people will choose to work with you just because they like you. There's a saying that I love that says, all things being equal, people will choose to work with people they like. All things being unequal, they will still choose to work with people they like.
I was going to say, even, it's interesting. We may have the greatest product on the planet, but also some people may not necessarily have the best product on the planet, but they're easy to deal with. They're fun to deal with. They're organized. They're disciplined. They're on time. They follow up. They're responsive. And I'm finding, especially in the event industry, event producers, event planners, it's not that quality isn't so important, but it seems that really just being good to work with is the top.
It really is and in the event industry, that's particularly a thing because they're pulling their hair out. I mean, the world is on fire all the time. And the last thing they need in my world as the event filmmaker was me coming over whining about the lighting, was me talking about how the vendor meal wasn't good enough. I was always more of a photojournalist in my style. So the guests often didn't know I was there. But there were times when I was working with an event planner for the first time where they were paranoid that I really wasn't there, that I had left for an hour because I was not, they were used to working with people that were asking them questions, dealing with issues. What about this? I was invisible. And there was a top event planner that I worked with one time that when they saw the finished video, they were like, how is this even possible? You were not there. Like, I thought you had left. I thought you weren't even filming these things. And all of a sudden, I see the greatest angle of this I've ever seen. You were like invisible. And so it was that combination of finding a way to do great work that the clients loved, showing it to lots of people over the course of a decade, relentlessly, and keeping a positive attitude. There's also that saying about, how do you achieve what the other person isn't achieving? Well, it's you do what the other person won't do. And that's what I was doing. We were relentless. I mean, I talked to photographers that would say, well, I got this appointment at the Breakers. I went down there. I showed them my work for 15 minutes. They never called me. And it's like, duh, what do you think they did after that meeting? Do you think their life changed and suddenly they were like, my vision, my work for the next 15 years is going to be to get this photographer work? No, as soon as you left the room, they were not thinking about you anymore.
Well, then what about with you? Like after your, like 15-minute appointments, what do you think it was that did get them to follow up with you?
It was relationship. So, I mean, I would sit there and I would look at the work, but then I shifted my perspective immediately from once they realized that the work was good enough. It's like kind of like you said, like they care about quality, but there's even things that are more important than that. So they wanted to watch 60 seconds of my work just to know that it didn't suck. Once they knew that that was the case, I shifted immediately into this appointment is not about me anymore. The appointment is about you. What problem do you have right now that I can solve for you, that I can be the solution for? And so it was really about, saying to them, well, what are you doing about, show them my work, whatever. And they'd say, well, what are you doing about this right now? Oh, well, we're working with this person. Well, do you really like that person? Well, yeah, we really like that person. Well, then why am I sitting here? And they would say, oh, now I'm being a little more abrupt here than I were with them. It was always more diplomatic, but it was kind of this sense of, well, then why did you even take this appointment? They took the appointment because there's something in their mind that said there might be something better than that other guy, or they're not happy with something and maybe they're not telling you. And sometimes they would just flat out say, well, the client didn't like the last video he did, or he was late, or my assistant doesn't really like him, or whatever. They'll tell you like these most ridiculous things that you're like, I can't believe you just told me that. And they would tell me, and then I would say, well, look, I mean, I'm the solution to that problem. You have this problem. I'm the solution to it. I would always do it in a humble spirit and a loving, but at the end of it, they would feel like, you know what? This guy didn't come here to sell me himself. He came here to actually solve my problem and help me. That fits into the be real nice category. And then, 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, I would respond with some sort of correspondence that wasn't focused on my work. Could you hire me? It was always focused on how you doing with that problem? How's that problem going for you?
Oh, that's interesting. Bring their attention right back to it.
That's right. The pain. What is your pain? And how can I be part of the solution? And over time, I think people started to feel that I wasn't just self-serving. I wasn't just trying to build my business. I was truly trying to be a partner that made their world better, that made their world easier. And so because of that, I would always think of everything I worked on as a partnership. And in the long-term relationship, how could I do that? So, I mean, like you mentioned David Tutera. David Tutera and you introduced me to David Tutera in the early days. You and Charles Maring, the photographer, did in the very early days. And David and I are still friends. I'm working on a documentary project right now that I realized David was a perfect person to interview for. And I interviewed him a month ago at his home in LA, and we had dinner together. We're still friends. And it's because he didn't perceive me over the long term as a vendor. He saw me as someone that made his life better, that brought more joy to it.
Yeah, and that's big on. And by the way, I got to put this out there. David was on the show back in May. Tremendous conversation. He was so open and vulnerable, and it was a really great conversation. So in terms of when you then started to go in a different direction, when was that and why? What is the story behind you then thinking about going to a different part of the industry?
So, I had been working on these weddings for years, and the weddings had dragged me, as you mentioned a little while ago. The weddings kind of pulled me into some other sorts of video projects as well, because I would do a video for a client and they would love it and, of their wedding. And then they would say, you know what, I'm on the board of directors for this not-for-profit. We're trying to raise money for this initiative in Haiti. You made everyone cry with my wedding video. Could you make them cry about this initiative we're doing so we can raise $1 million? And they'd hire me to make that video. So that led into some interesting work. But what I realized was I was always making, videos and films that told the story of other people's dreams. And I realized I had dreams. I had stories that were my own stories I wanted to tell that mattered to me. And I realized I'd spent a decade mastering my craft. Because even though sometimes people make fun of weddings for whatever reason, or they say if you work in weddings, you're not a real artist or whatever, the reality is if you get good at weddings in any craft, photography, music, video, whatever it is that's kind of an art world, The skill of doing that is really next level. I mean, to be able to do that consistently with the time constraints, resource constraints, budget constraints, lack of control, all that stuff. And I realized that I had all the tools, the talent, and the mindset to be a great documentary filmmaker. And I just said, I'm going to make a film.
Gee, and so what was that film?
Yeah, that film is called Legends of the Night. And that's Night, Knight. And that film was on Netflix for a while. It's on Amazon Prime now. It was on Hulu, iTunes. And essentially that film, I'm a lifelong superhero fan, love superheroes. I had this idea to make a movie about the power of stories and how stories impact us. Because that's what I've been doing my whole life, is telling stories. And I thought about what would be an interesting way to talk about this. And my superhero brain kicked in and I said, Batman. Batman's this story that's been around for a long time. People love Batman for generations. Let's make a movie about people inspired by Batman to do good in the world, to be Batman in their own life in a positive way. And so that's what we did. So I spent 2 years making that movie, and it was kind of a viral hit. I mean, the trailer went viral pretty quickly among the Comic-Con community and other people. It's a very inspirational, touching, heartwarming movie. And then we, with the help of some amazing people all over the world, we screened Legends of the Night in 110 cities all over the world. We gave all the proceeds away to charity. We raised over $100,000 for charity with that film. And that created so much goodwill that me, as a total outsider who knew no one in Hollywood, the buzz that created caused distributors to pursue me. And the film ended up on Netflix and Hulu and Amazon Prime, even though I had no idea what I was doing.
Geez, what a great story. I did see the trailer to it. I love it. It's really fun. It's very touching. And you also talk about, whether it's in the website or the trailer, I don't remember, but it's also an approach to community building and relationship-driven engagement. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, and that was the thing I didn't realize I was doing all along with that project, is that what happened was we finished the movie and I really had no idea what to do with it. People would say to me, are you going to do film festivals? I'm like, I don't know anything about film festivals.
Yeah.
Are you going to do this thing? I don't know anything about any of that. I mean, I was literally making it up as I went along, which is, most people would say, is the worst way to do things. It's very unstrategic, but I didn't know any way else to do it. I was making this movie and I didn't even really know why I was making it. I just knew I had to. Sometimes you just know that. And so I just said, I connected with a distributor. I said, here is what I want to do. I would love for people to be able to request screenings of this film in their local movie theater, with the proceeds going to whatever charity they choose.
100% of the proceeds, Brett?
Well, yeah, that were going to come to me. So there were some costs for the theater. There were some costs, some hard costs, but everything that would have come to me, let's give it to charity. And so I just knew that was the right thing to do. And everybody said, this is a crazy idea. But I also kind of said, well, what else am I going to do for theatrical? I don't have $1 million to spend on this for marketing and PR to get people to come out on a Tuesday night and watch my movie. I mean, is that really going to happen? No. Maybe this will work and we can do something good in the process. But what was amazing was that these people stepped up all over the world and not only requested these screenings, but promoted it to all their friends and family and community and filled up these theaters all over the world. We did not spend a dollar on marketing or PR or anything like that. It was all grassroots driven by literally thousands of people all over the world who came together to do something good, to make a positive difference. And that experience really redefined leadership for me, and what leadership is and how it works, and the potential that all of us have to be leaders, and the potential for our work to be a leadership move that makes the world better in the process, that makes communities better. And so for me, it was the best leadership move I could have made with that project. But then watching these individuals, many of whom had never hosted a charity event, had never raised money, had never done anything like this before, had never planned an event, watching them get out of their comfort zone, put on an event like this, pick a charity, invite all their friends and family to come, post about it on social media, even risk embarrassment by going on their local morning television show and making a fool of themselves by not doing a very good job with it, but to put it out there. And then the joy of seeing their photos from these events run through social media and how good they felt because they raised $500 for a charity they cared about. And they got to stand up in front of their friends and family and say, thank you for being here tonight. We did a good thing. This was awesome. They became leaders in a way they had never become leaders before because I had stepped forth with that leadership initiative. It really changed my perspective about everything.
Well, and let me say, again, you're talking about the new definition for leadership. And I saw in your site, I'd love to ask about this, that it reframed leadership as an art form that invites people to connect with a noble vision and make a difference together.
Yeah. Today, I define leadership not as managing behavior or telling people what to do. To me, real leadership is inviting people on a mission to do something extraordinary together. And every time you do that, it doesn't matter if it's in a big way as CEO of a corporation, or it's in a small way at your kid's little league game, or it's in the grocery store, or it's with your family in your own home. Anytime you invite people on a mission to do something extraordinary together, you're a leader. And so for me, that sense of everyday leadership, it is an art form because once you learn the craft of that, you begin to see every moment of your life as a leadership moment. I know we live in a time where people are distressed, they're upset about things going on in the wide world. I understand that. And you and I probably both sit in a lot of conversations where people express their concerns. The reality for me is there's only so much that I can do about that. But I've made a choice, instead of giving my energy to fretting and being paranoid and afraid of all that, I just say, look, what can I do? What is in this moment right now where I can be a leader that invites everyone around me on a mission to do something extraordinary and beautiful together? And now my work is about that too. So when I come to my next film, my next project, whatever it is I'm working on, I say, okay, how can this become an invitation to bring more goodness in the world and invite everybody around me into something extraordinary that makes a positive difference? It's changed my perspective on everything in my life.
I just want to take a moment and say, wouldn't we all like to have more exposure in our markets? I mean, certainly our own handling of social media and various other tools are ways that we do gain more presence. Though, what if you could have professional outside help that you could depend on to really get you the results that you need? And I know we all are happy to get much more presence. Well, I want to tell you about our sponsor of today, OFD Consulting. They are an award-winning publicity agency that focuses on the wedding industry, and their client portfolio ranges from top-tier planners and venues to well-regarded national brands and industry thought leaders. And OFD Consulting has placed clients in a slew of popular online and offline publications, including the New York Times, Martha Stewart Weddings, Style Me Pretty, many others. And they also have a service that's dedicated entirely to B2B press for those looking to elevate their brand reputation among peers through online mentions, guest articles, podcasts, and speaking engagements. So if you are a small business and you want to get your name out there, get more exposure for your brand, get your message out there, and you want to just dip your toes in the PR waters, check out the OFD Collective, which is a 3-star membership with robust educational and coaching opportunities, along with ongoing press leads. So definitely check out ofdconsulting.com. Again, that's ofdconsulting.com. Geez, I love this perspective, right? As I was looking through your site, I found, and we'll get to more of it in a minute, but I know you're also putting out these short films or this video series. And one of the titles got my attention, which you just brought up, which is How to Stay Positive When the World Feels Negative. Quite apropos for right now. And you talked about needing good positive stories and turning off to a certain degree the noise, and how it's all about, again, like you say, upbeat, positive, inspiring. And there was a tip you gave that I thought was great. Look for the light. And you were talking about when you wake up to commit to look for the good. Because, it's one thing to hear all these words, but it's another thing to be able to compartmentalize it in our minds and wake up. And that's, I think, when we're the most vulnerable, is when we wake up. And what is that shift? How do you switch that light switch?
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is, and I'll say this about me first, and then I'll get practical to your question, is that when I look back on my entire career, I realize that that idea of looking for the light and lifting up the light, that's been my whole career. When I was doing weddings, that's what I was doing. I was looking for the light in these people and lifting it up so that when they watched this video, it was about more than just memories of what happened that day. They were seeing the best in themselves, the best in others. And I think that's what's so miraculous about a wedding is theoretically, it doesn't always happen this way, but our goal is for it to be a day where we celebrate what is best about all of us. We wear the clothes that make us look and feel the most beautiful. We create these spaces to be in that express what we hope all of life and all of the world feels like and looks like. It's full of life and energy and color. We make time for the holy, for the sacred, to stop for a moment and acknowledge what really matters about family and commitment and connections and relationship. And then we have a time for celebration where we dance and show all of our energy and give all of our joy and all of our excitement. We're surrounded by all the people we love the most and that love us, and they stand up and affirm us and they say, you belong. We care about you. You matter. Your life matters. And when I realized that, I realized it was very noble what I was doing with my work, because I was capturing all that was best about us in a 20-minute film. And I was then encapsulating it in a way that the wedding just became a framework to say what's best about life.
To message that, yeah.
Yeah, and what's best about being a human. And so, the challenge is that what happens with a wedding, though? The wedding becomes about all the stress, about all the details, about all the missed flights, and is the silverware lined up just right? And did they get this decor exactly the way we wanted it, and all that stuff? And sometimes in the details, and I'm not saying it's bad to be detail focused, it's important in many of our work and many of our jobs, but we get so focused on that and all those little pieces and all that minutia that we lose track of why we were doing this in the first place. What did it mean? Why did it matter? And then coming back to your question, I think that's then the problem of life is, if we really sit down and make a list about all the things that we think about and that we think are our priorities, so often if we really sit down and get mindful of it, like if you sat down with a coach or a therapist or someone who's kind of outside your world, they would probably help you see that a lot of the stuff you're really stressed about doesn't matter that much. I saw a quote that said, if you're not living in a James Bond movie, the reality is your stress is probably mostly in your head, which is this idea that most of us are living at this high level of intensity. And the reality is we're not living in a James Bond movie. It's okay. Just let it go a little bit.
It's funny how it does feel like that at times, a lot. The voices in our heads, oh my God.
But it's not. The world is not about to explode because of an evil genius that is attacking us. Well, okay, let me put that aside.
I know it's about to.
However, that sounds like the thought of every James Bond movie, but I realized what I was saying as I said it. However, that said, in our personal lives, we're not really living that way. It's okay to stop. There's a story that I think is in that video you're referencing where I was filming with this little, 4-year-old girl. And she got out of her car when I was filming with her. We were going to visit someone. And as I was filming, she gets out of the car and there's this construction going on. And the whole driveway and sidewalk and everything is all just a mess. It's rubble everywhere. And I was worried, okay, is she going to step on a nail? Are we okay? And I know this is ugly. I'm trying to film around it so that it doesn't look so bad. And then this little 4-year-old girl, Violet, gets out of the car, looks down at the sidewalk, leans over. She has seen this tiny little flower. I mean, I never would have even seen it. That's growing out of this rubble. And she picks it up, holds it in her hand, takes it into the house, and gives it to this person we're visiting who's struggling with sickness. Now, I missed it. I didn't see it. She saw it. And I think that's where things like mindfulness are so important. The ability
that she was open to choosing to see that, in a sense.
That's it. The ability to stop and just experience a moment. Things like the holidays, we get so hyped up about, is the turkey the right temperature? Is this the right thing? If we get this right, did we wrap this up? And we don't stop for a minute and just say, look at the majesty of what I'm sitting in at this moment. I'm surrounded by all these people that love me. This is wonderful. This is beautiful. And this is enough. I don't need more than this in my life. And once you start living that way and seeing it that way, when you start looking for the light, you realize that it's all around us. It's everywhere.
Well, and I want to go in a slightly different direction that is very much connected to what you're talking about. There's another short film that you have, which you titled How to Face the Unknown. You know, that it's usually, you talk about unexpected results from being open. And I very, very, very much believe in this universal force where it is being open in order to even recognize the opportunity. And talking about, if you could talk about this, you mentioned in the film flow versus intention, because I think that's a good part of where this is about.
Yeah, you know, a lot of current thought talks about the power of intention. And I understand that and I get it. You know, the idea that you need to focus on this thing, put all your thought and energy behind this very specific goal and go after it. And some people really thrive that way. Like they do that, and a year from now, they've got that thing. They've accomplished that thing. They built that business. They achieved that milestone. They built that relationship, whatever it was that was their very specific intention. Anytime in my life I try to do that, for some reason it never works for me. And I always felt that I was like bad at that. It was the equivalent of saying like I would be at the base of a mountain. And the equivalent of the way we look at many achievements in our life is we look up to the top of the mountain and say, I'm going to reach the top of that mountain. And we would, you know, go as hard as we can, push up to the top of that mountain until we reached the summit. And that never quite worked for me. I would climb up 100 feet and then fall to my death. You know, it seemed to happen to me over and over again. And what I realized was that I was really not my energy, the way my energy in the world worked, was that I was not as much of an intention person as I was a flow person, which for me meant that I was not a mountain climber. I was more like a surfer, or, you know, that I did my work in the world. I got my board ready. I worked out. I practiced my technique. But then ultimately I kind of swam out into the water and I didn't know exactly what today was going to bring. I didn't know exactly how it was going to go, but I was ready. I did my work. I kept excelling. I kept getting my work better. I was talking to lots of people and creating networks and connections. I was being real nice. I was putting the right kind of energy out into the world. And what would happen is just about in the moment I was ready to give up and everything looked horrible, here was the big kahuna, you know, and the big wave would come and I would get up on my board and have this moment of epiphany and excitement, and everything was just glorious and unbelievable. And here I was riding this wave, and it was this fabulous thing. And everyone on the shore was like, look at Brett and what he's doing. It's amazing. And it was wonderful. But then the other thing that is always part of surfing is that as wonderful and majestic as that moment is, it almost never ends well, which means, you know, usually the end is not elegant. It's like you fall on your face. And, you know, it's like, well, that was amazing, but now I don't know what I'm doing next. Well, let's swim out there and do it again. And that was kind of, in some ways, in a strange way, my life over and over again. And it's sort of this cycle of things. So I never get to this point where I'm like, I've reached the top of the mountain. I'm here forever. I love, for example, what I'm doing right now. But I'm also very open to the idea that 3 years from now, I may not be doing this.
That's so interesting.
That it may be something else, but I trust that the next wave will come.
Well, as a part of all of this too, you know, I was reading, perhaps I don't remember if this is quoting or paraphrasing, but you were talking about how this helps you to be more comfortable with the mysteries of your life. I love that. And the unknown things, because they are leading you to spaces that are really good for you.
And that is the thing that so many of us are not good at. We live in a world where we think to be able to enjoy things, to appreciate them, we have to control them. We have to own them. And if we don't control and own them, then we don't actually have them. But the reality is that all of that's an illusion anyway. The things we think, you know, the biggest stories of disaster I ever hear from friends, family, others, are the people who think they've got it all figured out. They've got their job all figured out and it's perfect. They've got their finances all figured out and it's perfect. They got the perfect spouse or partner. They got the perfect, you know, 1.5 kids and the perfect house. And it's when they think they have, through their own energy and devices, put the perfect life together, that's when the storm comes. And you find out that your partner's been cheating on you, your kid's, you know, doing drugs and you didn't know it, somebody's been siphoning your money and you didn't realize it, And it's like all of a sudden this beautiful world you thought you controlled and put together just perfectly all falls apart and it destroys you. And I've realized that process of most of those people do is then they're sad, they're depressed, they're lonely, they're horrible until they can hobble together some new definition of control, some new definition that they feel they possess and own. And they feel somewhat comfortable in that until all of that falls apart again. And they just ride this cycle again and again, and they're never really happy or fulfilled in their life. I found that that's not mastering the control of that cycle. It never works because life is always so much bigger than you. No matter how much money you have, no matter how much power you have, no matter how good looking you are, no matter how much talent you possess, you can never fully control that cycle. What you can really do is enjoy the moment and be at peace with the mystery and trust that this is a benevolent universe and that life intends good for you.
So to get there, did you yourself go through those cycles in your own life?
Absolutely. Every stage that I have gone through in transformation, because it's funny, I mean, we haven't even really gotten to where I am now, which is I am making these documentary films, but I'm also doing an incredible amount of keynote speaking.
I was going to say, I was going to let people know that. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I mean, in 2008, I did 42 speaking engagements at conferences and events all over the world. And this year, it looks like I'm going to do more. I don't have an agent for my filmmaking, but I have an agent for my speaking. Like I wouldn't have imagined that it would have gone that way. But that I didn't expect. I didn't go through the strategic 10-point outline that you're supposed to go through to get there. But what's happened is that every time I've gotten to a new place, it's because something fell apart. It's because one of the reasons that I was open to making my first documentary was that I had this big wedding business and I had 10 employees on staff. We were traveling all over the world. And then 2008 hit and that entire market fell apart. I had to fire 6 people in 3 months because that work that luxury level wedding work completely vanished for me. And so this thing that I had spent a decade of my life building, something that I couldn't even control, the economy, took it apart. And I was depressed about that. But in the midst of that, I realized I needed to do something for me, for my art that mattered to me. That's when I decided to make my first documentary film, which transformed my life, which probably wouldn't have happened if the economy hadn't tanked and I hadn't done that. So now I'm making documentary films. I was in the middle of my second documentary film 3 years ago, and we had a problem with financing. The money didn't go the way I thought it was going to. And I was really disappointed. I took that very personally, and it really hurt me. I had to stop working on the project for about 6 months. Well, in the midst of that, I got invited to do some speaking engagements. I went and did them. That ended up blowing up. And now it is the thing that I'm in many ways finding the most joy from and that I'm making the most connections. I spoke at an event for the Boys and Girls Club of America. It was their national conference with executive directors of Boys and Girls Clubs all over the world in the room. And after that event was over 300 clubs from all over the world requested screenings of my newest film in their local communities. I could have never manufactured that. But yet it happened because this speaking thing happened, which happened because one of my films fell apart when I was right in the middle of it. And so it's always in those moments. It's the reason I've gotten to the point where it's painful even as it is to say it. I deeply believe that the universe is benevolent, that life wants good for us. And the pain that we're going through is often just a stage to get to that better place that we don't even see. We're kind of too stupid. We're too ignorant. We're too limited in our thinking to see all of the possibilities that could be for us. But sometimes we have to go through that pain for the slate to get wiped clean enough for us to be able to be open to something new, something better. And as much as I don't like it, as much as I hate it, I'm open to the idea that as much as I love the speaking I'm doing, well, what if that goes away? Well, then there'll be something else wonderful. It just may not be easy to get there.
Brett, man, I think this is a good place to begin to wrap up because I could go on and on and on with you. But this conversation, I think, is something anybody, everybody can get something from. I'm thinking myself of that I'm going to listen to this like 2 or 3 times myself. You are so inspiring. I really appreciate how you share, your heart. And going through your website, I urge everyone to do that. There is so much there related to everything we're talking about today. And I definitely want to commit to follow you and keep seeing where this goes. I love what you're doing, really. So what is the best way for people to find out more about you and to reach you if they want to?
Yeah, it's to go to my website, which has all these videos you're talking about. There's links to all my documentary films, lots of video clips of me from speaking engagements. And we did a podcast for a while, and there's like 22 episodes of that on there. And so there's just a lot of content on my website. And my website is just my name, which is Brett, B-R-E-T-T, that's 2 T's, C-U-L-P, BrettCulp.com.
Right. And we'll, of course, have all of that in our show notes. So, yeah, but, we're going to have to keep in touch on this. We're going to have you on the show again and follow what's going on. And again, I can't thank you enough for sharing so much. I'm so glad we're back in touch. I mean, what a great story. I'm so happy for you. And again, I'm so inspired talking with you.
Thanks so much, Andy. I've been grateful for our friendship over the years, and I'm happy to reconnect.
Thank you for listening to my conversation with Brett Culp. Wasn't that something? Wow. I definitely urge you to check out his website, brettculp.com, B-R-E-T-T-C-U-L-P, brettculp.com. He's got some amazing stuff there. Learn all about his filmmaking and wonderful keynote speaking, and definitely check out his short video series, which is really inspiring, at brettculp.com. Also, be sure to check out our website and our show notes at theweddingbiz.com. And please follow us on Instagram if you haven't already at Wedding Biz Show. We are really going to be stepping things up with that. Our social media handles as well for Facebook, same thing, Wedding Biz Show. And if you enjoyed this, if this was inspiring for you as much as it was for me, please share it with friends, family, colleagues. They'll really appreciate it. And don't forget to listen to the next level that follows this with a guest co-host, Zach Oxman. And for next week, I'm going to be releasing my interview of founder of Party Slate, Julie Novak. That is going to definitely be a popular show, so be sure to tune in. Thanks again for listening to The Wedding Biz.